All right, it's the housing and design meeting number 4. Yes, we've come so far from the originals. I'm gonna go over the agenda real quick. 2 hours, same as we usually do. There'll be a break, 10-minute break halfway in between. Feel free to grab a snack, use the restroom, walk around, stretch your legs. This is just to go over phase 2 of the project. So phase 1, we were talking about the mixed use districts, the commercial districts, and the climate friendly area overlay. This time we're tackling the chapters 4, 5, and 6. So not necessarily districts. The districts were part of chapter 3. So now it's kind of everything else, those general cleanup items, the things that we know were out of compliance with state law, and just we wanted to address this time around for this project. We're gonna do the potential conflicts of interest. We're gonna approve the meeting number 3 minutes, and then we'll get on to the actual presentation.
When was our last meeting?
November. Yeah, so it's been a while. Mostly because we were working on finalizing this for you guys to review.
Present a lot to the city too.
I did. Thank you, John. I have done 4 city council meetings since that November date, 2 in December and 2 in February, just to finalize phase 1 so that we can move on to phase 2. So we're done. We're pretty much done with phase 1, but now we got to get direction from you all for phase 2 so that we can take that to the planning commission and city council and get it adopted. All right, so potential conflicts of interest in your agenda. There's a memo in front of you guys if you guys want to look at it. The Oregon Government Ethics Law memo. Public officials may enact in compliance with ORS 244-122 by announcing the potential conflict of interest once on each occasion that the topic which presents the conflict of interest is discussed. Each occasion means each meeting at which a conflict of interest is encountered. So does everybody know what the difference between a potential and like an actual conflict of interest is? You can read it from the memo in case we need a refresher. An actual conflict of interest and a potential conflict of interest is determined by the words would and could. An actual conflict of interest occurs when an action taken by the official would directly and specifically affect the financial interest of the official's relative, or a business within which the official or relative of the official is associated. As a member of the TAC, you may be met with conflicts of interest when participating. Since it's not obligated to accept, the Planning Commission is not obligated to accept or enact the recommendations through any subsequent action of the TAC. You're met with potential conflicts of interest. So I'm going to call on you guys, those that are present, one by one, to announce any potential conflicts of interest. We'll go alphabetically. Jenna, any potential conflict of interest, please?
I have a potential conflict of interest since my architecture firm has projects in Springfield.
No actual or potential conflicts of interest, but I will state that I am on the planning commission as well as this committee.
Pranav?
No potential conflicts of interest.
Chip?
No actual or potential.
John Schmidt?
Potential. I own a planning and landscape architecture firm, and we do work in the city of Springfield. So I'll say that I could make recommendations on, could help my company.
And Darian?
No potential conflicts of interest.
Awesome. I flew through that. All right, in your packet, the next item is the meeting minutes from number 3 that happened in November. The date is on there. It's like it's November 12th. I'm just gonna have us wait a couple minutes. Please look through this. See if there's anything that grammatically is incorrect, anything where we might have been in error, misquoting you. If there's nothing, we'll just move on to approving it. And if there is anything, just let me know. After 2 minutes.
Is Edward Zakorek on your committee?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to promote him. So he should be joining by Zoom. Want to ask him first. Potential conflict of interest.
Everybody just give me a thumbs up when you guys have reviewed it and you're ready to move on. So not a couple months.
No potential conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Edward. I was gonna call on you when we were done with this. Appreciate you. Everybody good? Minutes? Okay, so any potential edits or questions about the minutes? Otherwise, we will approve them. Thumbs up? Awesome. Thumbs up? Awesome. Yay! All right, let's move on to the next item. Sarah, would you start the presentation for me, please? Okay, great. So, again, this is meeting number 4, and we're just gonna go over the code amendments. Sarah, next slide, please. So I just want to give a background and refresher where we're at with the project real quick. I'm gonna drone on for a couple minutes before we actually jump into the code amendments. Sarah, next slide, please. All right, so what was this project about for the Housing Design and Climate Friendly Areas project? Again, we're continuing the ongoing work of Springfield's housing strategy. We're coming into compliance with the state housing related statutes and rules. Again, the intent is to increase housing affordability, production, and choice by reducing regulatory barriers. And in particular, phase 1, we looked at those mixed use districts and commercial districts. In 2024, DLCD contracted with Cascadia Partners. They are our consultant on this project to work with us to draft these code amendments. The first phase of the project, again, I just mentioned, we had the code and plan audit. We did that spring of last year into the summer, followed by some concepts. We presented the concepts to you, to the Planning Commission, to move forward with the proposal, which was to allow more housing down Main Street in our commercial areas. And then now we're actually working on the code amendments. Phase 1, we already talked about in November. This is phase 2, now in March. So again, the audit looked at our code and refinement plans, which were out of compliance with state law or a barrier to housing production, affordability, and choice. And then we had those concepts again, September, October. And then as John mentioned, I was very busy for work sessions with the city council, 2 in December and 2 in February. So the results of all the work we've done so far is on the screen. And I'm just going to summarize them again, basically, so we remember we're all on the same page about some things. So this resulted, number 1, in where we're providing more opportunities for housing by allowing housing in mixed use development in more locations. This includes all sites less than 1 acre along Main Street in the South A corridor, all CFA sites, and all neighborhood commercial district sites. Then we're going to lessen the economic barriers to mixed use development by providing more flexibility for the size and location of commercial space in a mixed use development. Again, like in a mixed use development, right now we have 60% of a mixed use building. The ground floor has to be commercial. The rest can be residential. So we're allowing more flexibility, what that ratio looks like, in particular in our mixed use districts than in our commercial districts, right? Then we'll provide more opportunities for multiple unit housing in more locations. So again, this includes all sites less than 1 acre on local and collector streets along the Main Street and South A Street corridor, right? So if you're along Main Street, you have a side street off of Main Street, multiple unit housing is now allowed where it wasn't before. We'll also allow it in the CFA overlay district for mixed use commercial lots not fronting on arterials. So again, this wouldn't be if you were on South A or Main Street. It would be like if you were off of South A or Main Street in our mixed use commercial district, then we would allow multi-unit housing. And all mixed use employment and mixed use residential lots. And that's for the CFA overlay, we would allow townhouses. So our mixed use employment district, again, that's gonna be our former Booth Kelly mixed use district. We're gonna rezone that to mixed use employment. And then the last one, to ensure an efficient use of land and encourage higher density housing, will apply minimum density standards to all districts. So now there will be 15 minimum density per net acre if you are a mixed use development, and 20 if you're 100% multifamily. That applies wherever you're building housing. We're gonna modify the height step down standard. So again, we used to have a standard of if you're within 50 feet of a residential, low density residential district, then you could only build within that 50-foot setback, the building can only be 35 feet tall. So we went from a 50-foot setback down to a 25-foot setback. So we basically halved it. And that's how tall the building has to be. So you can build buildings closer and about the same height. We'll allow the greater lot coverage in our neighborhood commercial and mixed use residential districts, and then we'll allow up to 4-story buildings in the neighborhood commercial district, where previously they just used to be 2 stories, basically doubled the height. Next slide, please, Sarah. I also want to talk about the climate friendly areas project, just a refresher on this and where this is. So again, the Land Conservation Development Commission initiated rulemaking for the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Program in response to Oregon State Executive Order 2004. The rules require cities to update their land use regulations to allow relatively dense mixed-use development with access to walking, biking, and transit in selected locations called climate-friendly areas. And the city of Springfield must adopt this into our code by the end of this year. So we're on a little bit of a time crunch to kind of get these things wrapped up. On February 10th of 2025, Council designated 3 areas in particular. The primary climate-friendly area is Glenwood, you can see on the map. And there are 2 secondary areas, one in downtown and one in Mohawk. And then also when we've gone to council has directed a portion of the Booth Kelly mixed use district to be in the climate-friendly areas overlay. So we took a look at the existing mixed use employment district in our development code. No properties are currently mapped to the mixed use employment district. So it allows us this flexibility to do this rezoning if we want to. But the Booth Kelly area and the light medium industrial community commercial corridor district and gateway closely aligns with the intent of the mixed use employment district. So in order to reduce kind of the overall districts, right, we got a Booth Kelly, we got the mixed use light medium industrial community commercial, mouthful, and we have the mixed use employment district. We're going to go from 3 down to 1. Next slide, please, Sarah. So where are we at right now with this project? Again, I mentioned that we have to adopt the climate friendly areas code amendments by December of this year, but we hope to have 2 separate but simultaneous adoption package for the CFA and for this project in particular. So they'll be going at the same time, but they'll be separate packages. The Glenwood CFA amendments must be co-adopted by Lane County. So we have scheduled a number of joint hearings with Lane County Planning Commission. Sandy actually just hosted one on Tuesday night, and that was for Glenwood. And the Board of County Commissioners, we're hoping for spring of this year, and then fall of this year, ultimately for adoption. Overall, we want to make sure that the policy direction we received tonight is in line with the vision for Springfield, and then as we progress into the fall. So again, thanks so much. I know this is really complicated. I wanted to give you guys a refresher before we get into all these other code amendments, and it's complicated. Any questions before we move on to the policy discussions tonight? Jenna.
I don't want to derail us, but the Glenwood being part of the CFA, were you saying that that was going to allow more mixed use?
Yeah, I'll briefly give you the highlights since this is fresh in my mind. And Edward, can you hear me? Okay, I just want, it looks like it, because I'm in the back of the room. I wasn't sure how the mic was working. So the currently there are 3 different zoning districts in the North Riverfront portion of the Glenwood Riverfront there. There's a residential mixed use, office mixed use, and a commercial mixed use. And with the climate friendly area, we're going to combine all of those into one. That will be the Glenwood mixed use. And so it will basically allow all the uses that we would have allowed in any of those 3 zoning districts, but anywhere in that riverfront. plus a few others that are required by state law, like schools, daycare centers. So that's in a nutshell what's happening.
So you guys are amending the Glenwood refinement plan?
Yes.
Any other questions? Awesome. All right, next slide, please, Sarah. All right, we're gonna get into the chapter 4 next. So the first one, 4.2, 100 infrastructure standards and transportation. Again, this section generally removes vague or unclear references to future development expectations and undefined terms. There were a couple specific things in this section. So again, take a look at your packet. The legislative draft has it all marked up, but I'll just reiterate and summarize basically what happened. In 4.2.105, there's information about when a traffic impact study is necessary for a variance and unknown issues threshold. That was clarified in the draft code. We replaced references to maximum block length in the mixed use districts with a new section. Just because we amended the mixed use districts, we want to be very clear about what the new reference is basically in that section. And then we list the max block lengths for CFA areas. We removed the reference to fully improved street as defined in 6.1.1110. That's our definition section. A fully improved street means a street that includes a quote fully paved surface, curb, gutter, storm drainage, sidewalks, street trees where applicable, and street lighting, all constructed to city standards. So again, the phrase fully is redundant in this case. Next slide, please, Sarah. Street. I want to highlight that. Make it look all pretty. Yeah, like our communications department.
They had the buried power. Great. The city was lucky because you could close the road and access management other ways.
Awesome. Lighting. So we're talking about transportation. Let's see if it'll work. Hopefully I didn't kill it. Next slide, yeah. Okay, so another major amendment. This was at the request of Mark, who used to be the code writer here. He's now the head of current planning. He's also here tonight to help answer any questions that I might not be able to answer. We amended the driveway standards in 4.2.120 to reclassify this section as either a driveway approach, the part of the driveway on private property and within the public right-of-way, or driveway standard. This matches the definition for driveway versus driveway approach in 6.1.110. It also clarifies what driveway approach standards apply to multiple unit housing and mixed use development with residential uses in the community commercial district. So again, we just need to be clear. If you're looking through our driveway approach standards, there's different driveway standards if you're a commercial building, an industrial building, or a multi-unit development. So just need to be clear how these standards are kind of going to work together, especially if you're building multiple unit housing or mixed use development with residential uses in the commercial district. Next slide, please, Sarah. Infrastructure standards and utilities. We made some minor amendments to our stormwater management in 4.3.110 to remove redundant phrases, again, like alternative treatment standard. There is no alternative treatment standard, it's just the treatment standard. Other amendments are based on direction from subwater and electric, which include removing phrases which are unnecessary, like feeders, which are the same as a backbone distribution, or other redundant things. It's in your packet. Sub also requested additional width for public utility easements adjacent to collectors and arterial streets. We went from 10 feet to 12 feet, an extra 2 feet. And clear language that easements be centered on shared property lines, not right of way. So if you had two property that were abutting each other and you needed to put an easement in their backyard, each person gets, let's say if it's 8 feet is the minimum, each person gets 4 feet on their property for that public easement. That's what we mean by centered on property lines. Next slide, please, Sarah. Landscaping, screening, and fencing standards. This is a fun one. We added screening and fencing standards. They're required for mixed use development with residential uses. again, because we don't have that listed in the code right now. The fencing standards in 4.4.115 listed an exception to the base height standards for storage areas in residential districts. This conflicts with the existing storage area requirements for discretionary multiple unit housing in 4.7385, so the standard was cut. Finally, the base height standards were reworked so that a fence height can be exceeded for mixed-use development with residential uses. Fences can be taller than 8 feet along side and rear yards abutting streets with 4 or more travel lanes. So if you think about it, this really impacts Main Street, right? 4 or more. Wanted you to be able to have taller fences if you want along your side or your rear, especially if you're building multi-unit housing, whatever. We want you to have that screening if you want it. And our fences can be taller than 10 feet when abutting commercial or industrial districts along common property lines. So again, if we're allowing more multi-unit housing, we're allowing more mixed-use development in our commercial districts, especially in certain sections of Main Street. You have commercial development abutting industrial districts. So again, we wanted to allow you to have taller fences if you want to have that screening and buffering. This is a fun one. Loading areas and drive-through facilities. So the CFAC walkable design standards, again, that's that giant umbrella we're working under for the Housing and Design Initiative. They're also working under for the CFA areas, and they have specific rules. So in this case, it's Rule 0330 and requires drive-through facilities to be designed in a way to support pedestrian-oriented site design and limit the negative impact of facilities oriented to vehicles. It's pretty much the specific language that they use in state law. So the standards were renumbered and reformatted for loading areas and drive-through facilities. And then we added the language from the CFAC Walkable Design Model Code for drive-throughs. So this includes requirements for walk-up service area standards. Again, if you have a drive-through, let's give you an example of Dutch Brothers. Most people have seen the Dutch Brothers here on Mohawk. You can see that there's now a little walk-up area where previously there were 2 stacking lanes, 2 drive-through lanes. Now, in order to meet this 0330 requirement, you have to have a pedestrian walk-up, generally facing the street. Stacking lanes and service areas must not be between the buildings and the street. So again, you can see Taco Bell up at the top is a great example where you have a stacking lane pretty much fronting the street.
Looking at the draft code in there in this section. Loading areas 46130 drive-through facilities.
Yep.
Because I was first reading it, I thought you were burdening the vehicles, but maybe I'm misinterpreting it. In section A about safety, it says leaning towards the street. So there's still vehicular access that can be stacked and parallel to the street to meet those standards, but you're talking about a pedestrian connection to the facilities?
Yes.
Okay, because I read the draft code in there. Maybe I was misreading it.
Yeah.
Special regulation for loading areas and drive-through are intended to support pedestrian. Drive-throughs must be oriented towards the sidewalk and offer points of entrance service that can be directly accessed on foot. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean the vehicle stacking has to be oriented towards the street because you can't fit it on a lot of properties.
Yep.
You have to come in and spin and turn and all that.
We also listed a minimum stacking length range. So this is from the model code. 2 stacking lanes. So Dutch Brothers is a great example over here on Main Street. There's 2 lanes there, right? That can be a minimum we request of 150 to 160 feet. I'm sorry, for 1 stacking lane, 150 to 160 feet. For 2, 75 to 80 feet stacking lane. So that just means we don't want any vehicles entering there or basically loitering, I guess you could say, in the right of way. We want you to pull off the right of way. We want you to be, if there's shared access, we want you to be on the property, not in the right of way, not blocking traffic. If you're going to go get your coffee, things like that. I do want to preface, okay, that this section is unique in that there are some standards, again, that we have to abide by state law, but we have flexibility in this section that we don't have to. Okay, like there's the minimum we have to abide by in order to meet state law. And if you're looking at this in the drive-through standards in D, basically D1A Walk-up service areas must be accessible by customers arriving on foot using a mobility device or by bicycle. Customers using a walk-up service area must have the same or better access to goods and services as customers using the drive-through. That's word for word from state law. So I could just plop that into the code and say, that's how we meet state law. But if you want additional clarification on what exactly that means, I have put the model code language in here. We have flexibility, again, on what we choose to implement beyond that. So you can say, okay, I don't want a minimum 75 to 80 stacking lane or 150 to 160. I have looked at other jurisdictions. Eugene typically does 100 to 200 foot stacking lane. So this is actually less than Eugene stacking lane requirements. But there's other things in here again that if we have flexibility on to choose. I'm gonna keep going just so when we'll come back to this. Sarah, next slide, please.
Thanks for adding that, because sometimes the model code for the state just is so general.
It is, yeah.
The same access for pedestrians and cars. I mean, that's.
Yep. What does that mean? Okay, so the next section, we consolidated all specific development standards into 4.7-100. So there will no longer be any development standards in 4.7-200 with these changes. One of the biggest changes is the addition of mobile food units, AKA food trucks or carts. They're broken down by review type. There's two different review types. Type 1 mobile food unit application is either a new standalone unit, the addition of one to a site with an existing one, and an expansion of a covered seating area. So generally what I mean, like you have one food truck or one food cart on a site. Type 1 review. Simple, right? We're imagining this as like you're gonna move that truck probably. You're not thinking of it as a long-term use. Versus when we get into a type 2 use. These includes a mobile food unit pod of, again, 3 or more units on one site, or a new drive-through unit. So again, we want to be able to look at that site, want to make sure that you're not loitering in the right of way if you have a drive-through. We want to make sure if you're putting 3 or more on a site, that it's got areas for you to park, it's got areas for pedestrians to walk up. You've got access to services if you need it. And then also when a site requires new access or when adding a structure to a unit or pod, it's also considered a type 2. Okay, what's the difference? I love this. This is pretty clear. I'm going to give you some examples here. For a mobile food unit pod, it must have a paved internal connection of at least 5 feet in between the unit and the public sidewalk. So you can't just throw it in somebody's driveway. Got to pull it off the right of way, right? The pod must be self-contained unless the site is given permanent utility connections. Again, that's generally a type 2. Covered outdoor seating is limited to a total of 150 square feet per unit, up to a combined total of 2,500 square feet per site. But all covered seating areas require building permits. Finally, pod sites in the CFA overlay, which provide more than 1,000 square feet or more of covered seating, must provide at least one pedestrian amenity. So again, if you're in our mixed use districts, generally we require you guys to have a pedestrian amenity. That could include a mural, landscaping, seating areas, things like that, seating beyond your covered seating, right? Just in your mixed use district, so in the CFA overlay. So again, that's going to be in downtown or in Mohawk, those areas in particular, if you provide a lot of covered outdoor seating. For mobile food units, again, I love this example. This is showing you, okay, it's going to be at this location on this date, come see us. They must be located on an existing durable dust-free surface of asphalt, concrete, or other materials. That does not include gravel. We want you to be on a paved surface. No new vehicle access is allowed. So again, I can't like put it on a site and be like, well, there's no way for me to park, pull off the site. I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna ask for a new driveway. Nope, it's gotta be an existing site with existing paving. No new permanent water and sewer connections either. The unit must be located outside of vision clearance areas, setbacks, walkways, or landscaped areas. And if a pod is located within 25 feet of the right-of-way, it must have an active service window oriented to the street. Some flexibility there again. Right? It's up to us what standards we want to implement. Sarah, next slide. Temporary uses, the great one. So this whole section was pretty much rewritten from our existing temporary uses section. The first one for 4.8105, manufactured dwelling or RV after a disaster, it brings the code into compliance with the state statute, which allows them to be occupied without connection to utilities when a single unit dwelling is being rebuilt, generally after a natural disaster. So again, some of you may have been here when the fires happened. Was that 2020, 2022, something like that? 2020, yeah. Holiday Farm fire, and people were rebuilding their houses, and they could have been staying in a manufactured dwelling or an RV in the time while they were rebuilding. So now the state law says implement that, put that in that code. That's a requirement. For 4.8110 emergency medical hardship, we moved the standards out of another section to this section again because we consider them to be more of a temporary use. Then we had three different standards in 4.8110, 115, and 120. We replaced it and just called it a temporary building. The intent is to simplify and streamline so that a temporary building can be used in either a lot or parcel under construction, as a sales office, or as a temporary office prior to construction of a permanent office. This was a special clause for Mark. He asked that we add for a clause in there for construction laydown areas that temporary buildings may be located, quote, a reasonable distance from the primary use and not necessarily on the same site when space is limited. So a great example of this is, let's imagine downtown and you're building a new building in downtown and you have to have a place to put your construction equipment and it can't be on the site that you're building because there's no room to park it. Mark was like, I want a site where I can be able to put my construction equipment that isn't the site that we're building. And I'm not going to ask you to go through the whole site plan review process or anything like that. It's a temporary use. We have flexibility.
In the limit of work for a site plan review, it would be an independent application or?
It wouldn't be an application at all, it'd just be allowed. Another good example is Mill Street. When they just reconstructed all of Mill Street, the big construction laydown area was over here off South A.
Oh,
So they fenced off that huge vacant asphalt lot and did all their pipe and lay down stuff. So that we just allowed them to do that, even though we didn't have a specific provision in our code. And so we just wanted more clear direction in our code to allow that in the future.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Because a lot of contractors have to get a joiners and it's limited work and then you have to do erosion measures and things.
They're kind of like right across the street when the Rivet building was rebuilt and they leased the Chambers lot for their kind of staging laydown area, same kind of thing.
Next one, 4.8120 farm produce sales and 4.8125 temporary real estate office sales office or model home. Again, we replace this with existing standards with clearer language. It's pretty much the same thing. We're clear about what we want there. And then for 4.8130 mobile food units, we just note that this is a temporary use and then we refer you to the other standards that we just talked about. So this section in particular, this is we're still working through it. We're still working out the kinks, but it would require a temporary use permit. And we'll get into that when we get into the questions, basically what that would look like. There, next question. All right, so the first questions. At the very beginning, we talked about changes to 4.2100, 4.3100, and 4.4100. The changes to 4.2100 were made to clarify terms, uses, and to comply with the CFEC CFA standards. To 4.3100, they were based off sub, water, and electric staff recommendations. And then 4.4100 were add instances where mixed use development with residential uses should also have screening or fencing standards. So do you have any questions or concerns about the changes to this section? And I'm all ears. Feel free to go back to your draft code too. And we can also, Sarah, I'm going to have you scroll back actually.
How far?
Just keep going. So again, here we talked about improvements to streets, right? Walk length, when a traffic impact study is required. Next slide. We talked about driveway approaches, right? What's the difference between a driveway approach and a driveway standard? Next slide. We amended some things in our stormwater management section. And there are some odd little things in here in 4.3, 125, 130, and 140. Those were all recommendations from some water and electric, mainly about we want like increased easement widths, things like that. And then the last one was about these screening and fencing standards. So again, we wanted higher fences when you're building housing next to commercial industrial uses.
Allowed or mandated?
Allowed. You do not have to do it. Just a helpful little thing if you want it.
The only concern, and I haven't looked at this section closely, would just be. You said specifically along Main Street, and I'm just thinking like at some point. Is it creating a friendly, environment? But I'm assuming that would be farther out East Main Street, but still long term. As you get little pockets of walkability, and then you are barriering them from happening because suddenly there's a wall of fences.
And actually, this is not new code. So it actually existed before. We just kind of got clear about the language, wrote it a little clearer than it is right now.
Yeah, what's in this 3-pack right here, what's controversial? Anything, or is this all pretty?
I would think maybe the drive-through. So Schmidt had a great question about that of like, hey, like what's required here, what's not required here. So there could be, maybe you're representing a developer who wants to put a drive-through and they're like,
Yeah.
The way I cite this building on this site makes it so I have to put a stacking lane between the building and the street.
Yeah.
So we had a situation like that sort of with Dave's Hot Chicken. Anybody knows where that is on Mohawk? And they said, well, Taco Bell across the street has a stacking lane that fronts the street. And this site is really small and we have no real way for them to come back out except the way that they came in. So it didn't really allow a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah.
And now we're adding this into the code. Some developer or property owner could say, I don't like this deal. And
It's McDonald's right there too. It's on a corner lot. So when you're on a corner, it's especially difficult. Your two sides are facing the street. So how do you get a drive-through in a situation like that?
yeah, or if you don't have shared access. So everybody know the Starbucks on Mohawk too, just a couple doors down. So it's literally you got Taco Bell, you got Dutch Brothers, you got Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily have a shared access right there. I didn't know this until I was talking to my transportation engineer and they said, oh, the driveway, like most people go out right out onto Mohawk, but actually the driveway wraps around the building in the event that access is no longer permitted, so that the driveway still has a way to get out back the way they came. That's the way the building was designed that way. I also think some other potential controversial ones could be the temporary use section. So again, I mentioned that we may have to have a temporary use permit. What exactly does that look like? How is Mark's team going to manage that system?
You had a site and you couldn't meet all the new criteria. Is there a variance option? I mean, I know it's not used a lot in Springfield, at least we haven't used it that much, but say you had a site that was a drive-through and it meets like 90% of the code. But to meet it all, you can't fit it in. There's no physical way to do it. It's a self-induced hardship, I guess, by saying this program won't fit. But you're trying to bring a program to an area that, I guess that's the problem with variances or discretionary, but.
And Haley's been advocating for adjustment review that we don't have. We currently have a minor and a major variance.
That wouldn't apply to this though.
I don't
That's
know.
only for residential.
Okay, so minor variance allows it's for only numerical standards, so this wouldn't really be a numerical standard. It's,
Well, the stacking lane would be.
well, no, but the orientation of
Oh,
the
the orientation
drive-through.
there.
So it does create a potential hurdle to trying to squeeze it into a major variance where it might not fit.
Yeah, I mean, some I don't think should be like stacking lanes, because you see where they plop in a mom and pop and they stack out into right of way. So there's a safety there, but sometimes you can be that close to making it work on a piece of property that could be sitting for decades. Having that option, we run into that all the time, Jenna. It just doesn't fit.
There was some discussion with the Dave's Hot Chicken and when McDonald's rebuilt with our transportation planning engineer about the purpose of this stand, other than just like the aesthetic purpose, but from a safety standpoint, like headlights shining onto the road or into oncoming traffic. So the alternative evaluation in those cases was, how are you buffering that impact? So it could be it's higher elevation or with a wall or landscaping somehow blocking those headlights
or something
from like blinding oncoming traffic or cross traffic and those kind of things. So, based on your input on this standard, if it's an issue, maybe there's unless you do this to buffer kind of the impact, maybe it's an increased landscape setback or higher, or a fence or, you know, screening of some sort. If you do have to ultimately end up doing the drive-through between the building and the street.
I mean, you go both paths. If you take the state code a lot of times and just put it in directly, it's open to interpretation. And sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. And then having more clear interpretation can help. You know, it's not an easy one either way.
You go forward.
So is the intent of the stacking lane not being between the street, is it because then you assume you're paralleling the street and you're gonna back up traffic into the driveway coming in? Or is it that you're trying to create a better pedestrian experience?
Guessing, I don't know.
Yes.
Is it really just the stacking lane or is it the entire drive-through lane? Because when you're leaving, can that leaving lane actually go? Or is it just like you're asking about the stacking lane only from
You're
the,
basically limiting, unless you have a site that accommodates a perpendicular orientation on the site, like perpendicular to the street. But you're still gonna have then cars moving all the way around the thing, right? Then you're really limiting a drive-through to one side of a building, right? It can only ever have one lane.
Unless there's a creative way to put a physical break in there and a pedestrian path through. You know, I've seen that in some places where they get a little creative with it. I don't know if
Right,
they
is
should.
that the intent? Is it the intent that you have an uninterrupted path from a sidewalk to a little service window that couldn't have a car in it? Cause like I stand there right in the middle where cars go all the time, like,
Yeah.
I'm in line behind the car, like, I'm ordering my coffee, it's fine.
The time is right.
Yeah. Or is it that you don't want the,
Well, that's a good question. If you have
What's that
pedestrian
about?
access to a building that was striped with
Mhm.
contrasting colors that is marked and identified, but it's in a drive lane. And it gets to an area that I think you had 5 by 8 feet minimum at the building, would that suffice? And if that's a possibility, it gives a little more flexibility. Yeah, these are tiny sites, awkward, trying to make it work.
and they're usually activating a site that is really hard to activate otherwise, and so by limiting that activation, it seems like it, you know, it's kind of
Could just say.
dooming it.
Yeah, so like if you're looking at the, again, this section, it was broken down by two different ones and it's strict, right? So like the first one in 4.6130 D1A, that's generally what we have to abide by state law, right? But then if you look at B, then it says it's the walkout service window. It must be outside driveways, queuing aisles, and other vehicular paths, and have a waiting area a minimum of 8 feet by 5 feet directly adjacent to the window. It has to be connected to a sidewalk by a paved internal connection at least 3 feet in unobstructed width. So I know I've walked up to Dutch Brothers over here on Main Street, totally not 3 feet. Totally crossing those queuing lanes, the drive-through, whatever. So those standards definitely wouldn't be met here.
Though if it has, is it saying that you can't walk across the queuing lane or that the standing area can't be in the queuing?
The standing area, yeah,
Because doesn't that one have a window on the end,
it does.
like a standing?
But it might not meet the minimum 8 feet by 5 feet. Probably not. That's kind of big.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's all language that is beyond the state
That's right.
mandates.
yeah.
And that's
There's-
separate though from the whole stacking lane situation.
Exactly.
Right.
That's all of the, basically everything in D1B and D2 is model code language with some exceptions.
But is it adjustable?
It's only D1 that's basically like, we don't have any flexibility here. Mandatory. And if you're reading it, you're like, what the heck does this mean? Because it's really, could be anything. I could just plop that in the code and say, we meet it.
We're all working on trying to make this more flexible and easy to use, so I would err on that, you know. Err on that side.
Are there any standards in here that you would want? I guess is the question. So are you like, okay, I do want a service window. I do want that service window to be outside driveways, queuing aisles, whatever, but you strike the minimum of 8 feet by 5 feet.
If they have an indoor like option, do you still need that outdoor service window? I mean, like, you walk into a McDonald's, you walk into a Raising Cane's or whatever.
It says if walking up service is limited to an outdoor service.
Oh, limited to only, okay.
It says it can be Indoor, outdoor, and.
Okay, indoor service area, okay, great.
So if it's like a Starbucks or a human being and they're walk up only. And where was that section again? I was right there, I can't find it.
D1A,
Page 27 of 73.
4.6.1. D1A.
Okay.
I don't mind the pedestrian service areas as long as it doesn't then also require the stacking rules in the next section. Which it doesn't seem like it does.
8 feet by 5 feet directly adjacent to the window.
I mean, it's basically just saying you need to have that sort of little protective.
Yeah, I would imagine.
zone.
Generally, like our ADA, our sidewalks are like 5 feet.
Yeah.
Usually.
And so you've got
Yeah.
wheelchair turnaround access or something.
Yeah, 5 by 5's a rotation for a Tesla wheel device, but
67 inches now. But it's basically, yeah, you've got a concrete bulb kind of sticking out at the end of the drive-through little building, right? Which you can't turn tighter than that out of your car anyways.
the test is find a piece of property
Mhm.
in town,
Tiny one.
get a footprint, put it in, take this model code, see if it'll fit.
Like I'm picturing just the Dutch Bros there.
I'll go compare the two Dutch brothers.
Yeah.
Give you guys a.
Because the one on Fifth is at a corner, right? So in order to meet that stacking lane thing, it would only be able to have one drive-through because it has a street on either side.
Well, and then all the existing coffee shops that probably wouldn't meet this standard, you know, little drive ups like Mohawk
Yeah, they're
Marketplace or whatever.
Yeah, what's in Eugene, I think, probably.
That work just fine because they're in a parking lot. It seems to work, you know, I don't know.
Like in terms of like the unsightliness or whatever of it being a, you know, along the street frontage. I mean, I feel like there could be screening or planters or something potentially as a mitigation, like you were saying, Mark.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we don't have a problem with the walk-up service area. We may, flexibility on the 8 by 5, but we'll try to add something into D2, where we have flexibility, not necessarily with, you can't have the stacking lane between the building and the street. You could, but our preference is put up some landscaping, put up a wall, or you have no stacking lane between the building and the street.
Yeah, I mean, if a wall would be precarious because then you're creating a big blank wall.
And Sarah, actually, can you go back?
And like, I'd rather see that it's an active concrete cut than a wall. To what?
Keep going, keep going. Right here. So actually the Taco Bell, I wanted to show this. How tall do you think that wall is?
2.5 feet.
Yeah. So we'd probably want taller hedges, right? Or a taller wall to be like, if you're driving past, you don't just see cars. You don't just see the headlights like Mark said. It screens.
See the headlights.
Because
if
headlights
it's
could be the opposite direction of where you're driving. Is that the safety issue here? I'm not.
I think it's more just for pedestrian walkability. It's for cars entering and exiting. If they're all entering and exiting from one accessible access, it can create some queuing, stacking lane issues, right? If they're coming into the right of way. So again, what the Dutch brothers, do you guys remember this situation where there were a ton of cars in 2 stacking lanes, all trying to come in from that right of way? And they're loitering in the right of way, they're blocking the sidewalk because there's so many people who want to go to that Dutch brothers and there's no way for them to be able to pull off. So our traffic engineer realistically said, we want you to close off the stacking lane that's fronting the street so that you can pull around and not block the right of way.
So was that block wall in front of the Taco Bell and Mohawk required by code?
No, because we don't have anything in the code.
They just did it?
Yeah.
Well, there is something in the code currently, but it's vague. And so
Like landscape screening or?
I think the code currently says for mixed use commercial, something to the effect of drive-through shall not be between the building and the street. Don't quote me on exactly what it says, but it's vague enough to the point where, and this predates my time at the city, but the wall was a negotiated deal to get it there.
Like an adjustment kind
Yeah.
of, so, okay. It's a good graffiti wall now too.
Okay, Sarah, let's move forward because we got more questions to get through.
I feel like, but trucks, food trucks.
Yeah.
We didn't go.
All right, we'll get there, I promise, I swear. Real quick, I want to talk about the difference between residential care facility and residential home. This is super basic. With this section, pretty much the only change that we did was the residential home. We did add it to this section, but we did not say this section applies. So it's just basically saying, residential homes are subject only to the same standards that apply to single unit detached dwellings in the same district. That was the only clause here. So kind of under the same heading, residential care, they're under the same heading, but the standards don't apply. So you can see on the left-hand side, residential care facilities, there's all these additional standards, for residential care facilities, right? Generally, again, you're serving more individuals, probably 15 or more in general, versus a residential home, it's usually 5 or less. In
Oxford House or something.
yeah, like a residential district more than likely, as opposed to like a residential care home, other areas, bigger development, more of a multifamily vibe. It's the only clause. Any questions? Concerns? Pretty basic. Okay, hearing none. Sarah, move on. We talked about the drive-throughs. Let's keep going. Mobile food units, because I know Jenna wants to get to it. So a few questions here. Do you support allowing mobile food units to be located? I'm going to list off a whole bunch of districts. If you have questions, yell at me. So neighborhood commercial, community commercial, major retail commercial, general office, those are all of our commercial districts. Pretty much allowed anywhere in those commercial districts. We're allowing them in the campus industrial, heavy industrial, light medium industrial. So all of those pretty much industrial districts except special heavy industrial. Special heavy industrial is usually like a mill. Major industrial development. So we want to say not in that area, you can be close to that area.
But you could have like a food truck pod in campus industrial. We might actually be able to do something in campus industrial.
Yeah, that's what Mark was like, yeah, we want to see it. Let's see it.
Can we not have a taco truck roll up to a heavy industrial site and serve lunch?
No, I mean, I think heavy industrial, yes. So like we would have it in a heavy industrial, not just like not a special heavy industrial. So we would not want you to bring a food truck and park it on a site where we have like I said, like a mill or major industrial going on. There's probably a lot of like large trucks or things happening at that location. So we're just saying in proximity, but not on that site.
Those sites can be very long.
They can,
Like there's an office on the site. Couldn't it park next to the office on the site?
yeah. I think that clause actually might be state law, that there's something actually in state law that says that you can't put it on special heavy industrial. Probably. It's probably why it's excluded. Medical services. Then I've got the mixed use commercial, mixed use residential, mixed use employment. Again, all of our mixed use districts, generally downtown Mohawk. The public land and open space, hospital support overlay. That's Mackenzie-Willamette area is the hospital support overlay. Glenwood, general mixed use. So again, in that riverfront area. And the Glenwood commercial mixed use, Glenwood employment mixed use districts. Any districts that we should include or exclude? Jenna has thoughts about this, sounds like.
So I don't see why to restrict it. I mean, especially if it's literally rolling in for 2 hours for lunch and rolling out, like, yes, sure, maybe you don't have a permanent one set up next to a mill, but like our downtown used to have 24-hour restaurants because the mill was open. Like that's an industry of people that want lunch at any hour of the day, really, because depending what shift you're working, like that's a huge opportunity for economy, right? So why limit it? I don't, especially a temporary movable building, like it's not going to, like there's a very short window of time where an explosion hazard would affect that food truck and the food truck's not even a building. And like,
Yeah, and related to that too, a lot of the mills are really strict about their access. So if they want to put a food truck, they're going to approve it. Like they're gonna say, you could do it here, only here at this time. So they have their own safeguards to protect them. But I mean, think of International Paper. Well, they got the poorhouse kind of down the street, but they are isolated. There's a lot of people there. So they couldn't legally do that now.
Poorhouse.
42nd Street, International Paper. That's a big,
Yeah.
that's heavy
yeah,
industry.
like bring a taco truck in there for lunch for whatever 200 guys, like be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are there any federal standards or state standards where general public cannot be on an industrial site because of the nature of what's going on?
Like an OSHA thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it would come back to the owners of the property being willing to
Yeah.
Take that liability risk or
I'm not
not.
comfortable
Yeah.
with it.
In general, I think too, there's something in there that says you have to have a business license, so, you know. Regulated. If we could, so I'm hearing that we could with this, maybe say if it's a like type 1 mobile food unit, which again, I mentioned that's more of a temporary, then add it. If it's more of a type 2 process, then no. That sound like a good? Okay. Clear to the TAC, how mobile food units are reviewed is either a type 1 or type 2 process. So again, generally long-term mobile food units in a pod, or when units need public utilities, they're reviewed as a type 2 process. Everybody clear with that?
So the mobile ones are like an MDS. That's your only type 1, I think, isn't it? Minimum adult.
So we were gonna classify them as like a temporary use permit.
Temporary use permit, not land use. Oh, okay.
MDS isn't even a land use permit, but it wouldn't even rise to the level of MDS.
That's not.
Yeah.
It's basically they're allowed as a transient merchant permit today, as like a business license.
But it's more just like we want our, let's say our transportation engineer to just make sure that, again, you guys aren't violating,
Right.
putting it in the right of way or queuing or whatever, that it's situated on the site in a safe way.
But MDS they're still land use applications. I mean, they're not to the level of site review, but you have to have a written statement and plans and, you know, they take a lot of work. And then for a small vendor, that's a lot of money. So having just a temporary use permit, I think is great. Thank you.
It's a land use application. It's under state law. It's not a land use decision. What requires notice and opportunity to appeal. It's a type 1 process. Yes, a site plan.
A plan.
So I'm a mobile truck. I'm not, but pretend I'm a mobile truck, puttering around town, wanting to slum tacos. For every single location that I might serve tacos, do I need to do an application and a site plan?
Depends on how long you're situated there. So I think there's something in the code that says if you're there for longer than 24 hours, we want you to.
So the transient merchant permit is not under the development code today. It's under the municipal code. They switched it a handful of years or so ago where even for a transient merchant permit was your typical, a true taco truck that drove to a mill at noon and left at 2 or went to multiple. So they used to require site-specific approvals for those. But we did away with that because we recognize exactly what you're talking about. So now we just issue a transient merchant permit today, say you can go anywhere. We don't care where, you don't have to give us addresses. There's no drawing showing where you're gonna be. So that's today's current situation under municipal code for mobile food trucks under muni code transient merchant permits. So this is proposing, I think, to basically take it kind of out of the muni code, put it in the development code, but really not add much more layers of review. Or I think, I don't want to misspeak, so Haley can correct me, but the envision for still it being a type 1, probably we could figure out what that looks like, but it still wouldn't be site specific or a drawing of this is the parking spot I'm going to locate on this parking lot at these mills on any given day. But it's just, here's how I'm going to operate.
Check the box saying I'm not in the right of way. Check the box that there's 75 feet of queuing length from the right of way to your mobile, you know, food unit drive through.
But it differentiates between, so like this food cart pod downtown was kind of the first one we really had to deal with. And some of those are true trucks, I think, at least maybe one of them originally was. But they basically park there and they stay there for, you know, longer than just an hour or two or a day or two. So it becomes tricky to differentiate at what point do you regulate them more heavily for duration of time versus the true mobile ones that move daily.
And we tried to be very clear about that too, right? So like a type 1, we're saying, hey, like it's mobile, but it does have to be in a paved, like it has to be on asphalt. You don't connect to utilities. Generally, you don't have a covered area for seating. Versus like that type 2 process, which could be a drive-through or could be that pod we're imagining is more of a long-term use. Mark's approved some, you know, recently that have been like, we intend for these to be 3 or more, you know, mobile food unit trucks situated on the site for a long-term use. They need to hook up to utilities. They want to have a covered seating area. Maybe eventually they want to do a drive-through use. So we need to make sure that all of that is regulated. And again, Mark mentioned that right now it's in our municipal code. Well, any idea the last time we updated our municipal code for some of these standards? It's been a while. We have specific standards just for food trucks in downtown.
It's currently in process, actually. One of our staff is working on updating the business licensing part of the municipal code, and the newest food cart pod that's brought some questions to how we regulate them is the one out on Main. I forget the address. It's near
Meat
the,
Market Pavilion, it's like 48.
yeah. So that one has kind of just evolved from these transient merchant permits, and they've now have live music and, you know, a bunch of tables, and it's fenced off. And so it's become almost like this event center pod place that is kind of flying under the radar. It's like
Public house, but it's all outdoor vendors.
This is like Main and 48.
Yeah.
south side of Maine across. It's like the old farms, one of the farm nursery store type places is next to Grace.
Yeah, right next to Grace.
Antique store.
Okay, so last question, any questions on the various approval standards? Again, approval is separated into standards for mobile food units, accessory structures, covered outdoor seating, drive-through mobile food units, and mobile food unit pods. So we're looking through the code, Jenna.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay,
This is what this is here for.
so approval standards, the existing durable dust-free surface.
Yeah.
Why couldn't a mill or whatever, they have a big gravel parking lot, huge gravel parking lot, acres of, why couldn't they create a little paved spot where a taco truck could come from time to time?
So I just classify that as a type 2 process because you're creating a new access. But in general, we want it to be paved, and I'm gonna make Mark answer this question. Why do we want things generally to be paved, Mark, instead of gravel?
Well, the excuse I always point to is our MS4 permit for stormwater, but we do durable and dust-free can be pervious pavement. So, you know, I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to get into all that part of it, but a lot of it's a maintenance thing. A lot of it can be drag out of gravel into the public right of way. So, you know, talking about driveway standards too, it's like the first 18 feet of a driveway has to be asphalt, then you can have gravel. That's for drag out of gravel into the right of way. So there's kind of multiple probably reasons, but that's some of it.
Any good? Are we good? Questions?
I just feel like there's scenarios, and I don't have one in mind, where there's gonna be an existing situation where there's a large facility with a gravel parking lot, which I know a new parking lot wouldn't be allowed to be gravel, but there would be no difference in having a food truck park in that gravel parking lot next to all of the cars of the people that are working at that facility, and then they're not allowed to bring a food truck because they don't have a paved spot for it to park.
So Swanson Mill is a good example. So their employee parking lot is a big gray gravel parking lot. They have a paved parking lot in the front of the mill where the office is. But if they say, oh, we're gonna allow this taco truck to come on our lunch shifts, but we don't want to pull in our front office paved parking lot, you guys can park out on the gravel, why not? So, I mean, employees park out there
Right.
every day.
So that would be not allowed.
Unless you tell we should allow it.
It just seems unnecessarily limiting, I guess.
Well, then if you do pave it, then you've got to meet stormwater standards,
And you have to
right?
submit a whole permit to pave a little square to put your food truck on.
Right.
So maybe there's a carve out for an existing gravel parking lot
Yeah.
as part of a developed
If it's a
site.
grandfather parking lot that's being parked, that doesn't have to go to stormwater standards. You're not changing the use. You have a mobile use there that's using it in the same concept of the cars, and it's only temporary.
And part of the concern would be an undeveloped dirt or gravel lot that somebody's just gonna start parking across the street from the mill. And now you're on an undeveloped dirt lot or gravel lot, where that would be a different.
Yeah, are there any health department standards for kind of materials you can or cannot serve food on that we would be undermining?
I think I have a catch-all in there about that it has to be, you have to have that business license or Oregon Health and Safety stuff in here, but I don't, we just say you must comply with the Oregon Health and Safety stuff generally,
They're
so.
probably protected because they're doing it inside their facility and they meet all those requirements.
They're serving food out onto a surface. Health department's really cringy about stuff.
There's a lot of food vendors in Whitaker where I get it and walk out and I'm like, just eat it wherever you want.
And I guess the experience with gravel is that you can gravel a parking lot today and 5 years from now, it's a muddy mess. And how do you prevent that from being a problem?
We don't
If we
allow
just say
any
gravel.
gravel parking lots.
Again, like Mark said, it's generally we have the MS4 permit. Generally, we have regulations in our code that says like the first 18 feet, I believe, of a driveway has to be paved. So in general, it's for our MS4 permit, and then we just don't want you to carrying gravel out. Those are just generally the catch-alls. Okay, Sarah, next slide. Conversion of commercial to residential. Jenna knows all about this one.
Looks a lot better there.
So this one, we just wanted to clarify, it's a type 1 application. But we did not apply any minimum density or design standards. This was a marked catch-all for me again for this one, brought me back down to earth. So again, we wanted to say how these applications are reviewed, but we did not want to apply those minimum density or design standards. So again, if we're applying these minimum density standards of like 15 to 20 units, that's your minimum. Well, what do you do with a building like this that already exists and you just want to put some amount of units in there? You probably want flexibility. Same thing with the design standards. So I don't want to make, let's say Jenna comes in here and she's just like, I want to build this with multifamily. Well, Jenna, you don't meet the multifamily standards for the articulation of the building or the open space or whatever. I'm going to make you have to meet those design standards now. And Jenna could say, well, now I'm not going to develop it.
We're trying to adjust out of it.
Yeah, this had to go through a more discretionary process to get it to be approved because it didn't meet the standards.
Although we just did site review. for that,
Yeah,
I
we
think.
did say, but
But there was some
We
discretionary
didn't meet-
approval of the site review based upon the existing structure and its historic registry and all that.
if we did meet density.
There are sections in the state building codes that specifically address retrofitting buildings or reusing a building for a different use than the original one. And just looking at it today in the thermal and insulation, saying that you insulate to the greatest extent possible, but at least there's some give in the code. I don't know, there'd be some language in the codes, the building codes that would apply here, make that flexibility a little better.
All right, next slide, please, Sue.
Maybe could I just bring up another real recent example so there's an existing Hometown Studios hotel basically on the corner of Harlow and Pheasant. I'm looking at Google Earth right now. So it's for sale. They want to convert it it's kind of a rent by the week kind of hotel place. Well, they want to convert it to studio apartments. So nothing on that site's going to change. They want to buy it and just start renting it by the month. So I'm using that as an example to say, why would we make them change anything on that site to just now start renting them by the month instead of the week? And so that's the idea behind, are we gonna make them add windows to meet some design standard, or they're over or under the density, so you can't do it or have to add units or something? So that's just a real recent example of one we've been asked about.
Okay, next section, for multifamily standards. So related but not related, because most of the things in the commercial or mixed use district aren't gonna apply to these, right? But this was just kind of a general cleanup. We decided to strike the type 3 discretionary review process from the multifamily standards. Again, the only development that would have to meet these standards is neighborhood commercial. So neighborhood commercial, again, that's usually like your convenience store, your coffee shop, and usually a residential neighborhood. So in this case, we wanted that development to have to meet the design standards generally in a residential district, right? If you're building multifamily, we're saying you have to build them kind of to residential standards almost. You have to have that minimum open space, that minimum landscaping. The buildings have to look a certain way. Versus if I'm building in a commercial or I'm building in a mixed use district, we don't require common open space. We generally have a minimum amount of landscaping or a minimum amount of setbacks because those are high density areas, right? We're gonna have more walkability, more pedestrians, biking, less traffic, less trucks, hopefully, in those areas. So this would kind of be the only instance where you would have the new development having to meet these standards. Does anybody have any concerns about doing away with the type 3 process?
Concern with doing away with it.
So that just means you have a type 1 or type 2, no type 3. Hearing none. Awesome. We're moving along. Sarah, next slide, please. Okay, this one was for income qualified housing. This was at a request of our affordable housing policy analysts in our department. They wanted to reduce the affordability period from 30 years to 20 years. So the state statute actually does say 30 years, but our federal home funds, they generally do 20 years. So they just wanted it to be, wanted to reduce that affordability period. Pretty simple. Questions, concerns? Less time you have to qualify. Positive thing. Okay. Sarah, next slide, please. Temporary uses. So again, we majorly retrofitted this section, right? Do you support the list of temporary uses? So we had manufactured dwelling or RV as a temporary residence after disaster. Do you have to put that in there? That's state law. Emergency medical hardship, we just moved that. The other things that we had, again, more flexibility on, those standards in particular that we chose to change a little bit. Temporary buildings, farm produce sales, temporary real estate office or model homes, and mobile food units. Those are the sections that would have to apply, again, under that temporary use permit, which Mark's team's gonna have to regulate moving forward. Are there any temporary uses that you could think of that you might wanna like consider or that we might wanna develop? You might consider it more to be like a long-term use. So again, what's the cutoff maybe is kind of the example here. Mark gave that great example of like most mobile food carts or mobile food trucks, we're thinking they're moving all the time. So, you know, why are we regulating them? Well, Jenna asked, well, what's the cutoff? It could be this mobile food cart or this mobile food truck is staying here for several days. That's emergency medical hardship. It could be for a year. Manufactured dwelling or RV as a temporary disaster, again, up to 2 years. A temporary real estate office or model home, right? You build that first, and then you got to sell all the lots. And you occupy that model home as your office while you're building all your lots. So we consider these to be more of like a temporary use, but more of a long-term temporary use. You're not picking up and moving it frequently. Is that clear to everybody? Cool. Again, I just covered the temporary use and have the potential to impact abutting uses or transportation routes. What is the TAC's thoughts on this? Any recommendations, concerns, questions? So again, I mentioned it's going to be a temporary use permit that we're going to apply to these uses because they could have more of a long-term impact.
Like how you added, RVs have to be roadworthy, licensed, insured.
That's existing,
Oh, is it?
currently in our RV standards.
Oh, it
I think they're just being,
Yeah. Probably.
Is there anything or just like a
they're
random?
self-certifying that they meet that. We're not always making them start it up and move it down.
Is there anything for like an event structure? Like a temporary event, the circus comes to town.
That's probably under our merchant,
Okay.
like some, or, you know, municipal code,
Like
business license.
They put up tents for block party.
Yeah, or, but like for a week, right? Like, I'm picturing like you know, old timey circus would come put up a big old tent, right? And like all these buildings, like a little city, mini city pops up for a week and then it goes away.
Like vendor fairs.
Yeah.
Special event permits
Yeah,
through the muni code.
so it would go.
Okay, Sarah, let's jump ahead.
Can we circle back just for everybody? We don't have to click back.
Okay.
Like, does the, like, to the temporary overnight food cart, is 24 hours the right amount of time?
Somebody tell me.
It's a day.
It's one day. What if like, okay, you had a long day, can you come pick it up in like, I don't know, whatever, like, can it be 2 days?
72.
You want a week?
Could it be a week? Right? Like, what if it's at one location for a week and then it moves to a different location for a week? Like, why, like, one day feels like a lot of
Just what you
time.
said there actually about mobility and access. If you're there a whole day and you have to do cleanup and get rid of food and do all that, it could be late and then you have to leave the site. Not like you're planning on, that's.
And what if it's not one that has a motor in it and you have to use a truck and you have to
It's true.
access it back and then,
Or it's there for a multi-day event.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
but it's still temporary and it's still self-contained.
72 hours.
I'm gonna bug that because I just like the notion of the 24 hours kind of as an impetus for them not to stay for 48 or 72. If they have to clean up, that's great. And I think the 24 parallels the parking standards. You can't park overnight or for more than 24 hours on the street. 72, okay.
So I guess if
I like the idea of paralleling.
it should match that.
If you're there beyond a day, but you're there to just pick up and clean out. So you're really not, you're not violating that use. But
Write that into code.
Yeah.
actively cleaning up.
Well, I guess it would come down to enforcement and who would say anything and what would.
I mean, I can see like for some food trucks, like when we're trying to get a food truck to come to an event, for example,
Yeah.
having them relocate all the way across town for 2 hours is like kind of, it's a lot of work.
Prep a day in advance to be ready for the day. So,
Like for U of O games, they set up the night before, they're probably there all day, they don't wanna tear down that night, so,
Yeah.
you know, they come back the next day and tear down.
so 24 hours of active use with consumer activity.
Or can it just be a longer window of time? Like,
Yeah.
what is the right number? Maybe it's 72 hours. But just, I don't know, just thinking through what that number should be.
Even the parking on street one, at 72 hours, it's not enforced unless somebody complains.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, 72 hours for a food truck, sure. If it ends up being there for a week and there's garbage and someone's gonna say something.
Yeah, but if it's in your own private, like, business parking lot and it's a temporary,
It's convenient.
right? Like, why does it need to be 24 hours, right? Like, I'm gonna get a permit, like a bigger land use permit to have it. So.
I'm hearing 72 hours. Any objections to that?
I like it better than 24.
Okay, cool. You guys want to take a 10-minute break? We're a little behind. We can take a break. Stretch, walk, food.
How much more do we have?
We gotta get through chapter 5 and 6, which are shorter. Yeah. So I'm gonna call it break
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah. We get through all that 40 seconds.
Remind me which one live?
It was the remnant light weighted and industrial. That's the guy one.
Oh, for the auto. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Getting ready to do zone change, and he's like, stop, I'm not gonna build my other property. So he still owns it, it's just sitting there.
he's not gonna move into it now. Oh, that's, didn't we get him to the point where he could start operating?
Yeah,
Right?
oh, yeah. Well, no, I think what happened is when the contractor started to price stuff, the mistake he made is he had someone prepare plans without the contractor. And when he started to really price it,
Did those plans.
and he's like, and that young contractor's trying to help him, And then it got so BE, he's like, it's just not worth doing it.
Yeah.
Would you like to be great?
That's when the value engineering starts to come in.
Yeah.
Like, we can't do this big overhead.
One thing I did too that was really not helpful is I went to a shop to talk to him about it. I said, hey, look, if we're not gonna do anything now, let's just do the zone change. Because the part more valuable, like before we were rushing. And then he wasn't there, so the guys were in the shop, I'm like, I just want to talk to Brian about his property on 42nd.
Yeah.
And afterwards, like, why did you tell my guys about the property? I'm not trying to tell my guys, but then they started asking questions.
Like moving business.
Yeah, it was like, shoot, sorry. So
So he has other properties, you said?
apparently he does.
Okay.
I don't
He's
know.
in Springfield now?
Yeah, he's right on Q Street. He's leasing
Feedback
the
session.
center there, right down
like a lot.
from the TVS.
It's more though, that's my
Mm.
problem.
I know.
Is where do you just,
A bunch of
Sandy brings me back
Yeah.
that word all the time.
Right, but it's talking about something against.
Like it's a food truck, like,
So-
show you more.
Yeah.
Because like, the difference
Well,
between like you have a temporary food truck that attaches to a spigot for the 24 hours that it's there. And if it's like, if that doesn't have it, like part of a pod, have a temporary truck, they need to get the same, like.
Yeah. Well,
When they ask
the
them-
issue too, when I was trying to find like, how do I regulate this, right? Like, what's the cutoff?
So the
What's
pricing
the
on
cutoff
that thing.
between access, what's the cutoff between release?
What is
Yes.
it?
Well, I mean, it is, because like right now, we're like, okay, you're a long.
That's funny, Mark.
Close to a short term.
I technically graduated, but who's responsible, not like, I think that's the site plan, my food truck has a site plan.
Yeah.
That they submitted that and it's got like a four-way, whatever, dump slash water power station, and they can have a rotation of truck come and then they're.
They have to tee in all of the.
Each truck's either responsible for one if they're Coming in at very.
Law.
I knew there was-
Like,
Yeah,
once you've got approval of
I think
law,
those are the ones
here,
that
and
get-
like,
I can't remember, they were.
if you take one unit out of a pod and replace it with another one, then you have to go through the process again, and other people are like, no, don't do that. That's too much. We don't care that
It's
much.
surely like you need to, like the pot or the truck is regulated as a business, and then the connection is regulated. By the site, like, on the site, right? So it doesn't really matter.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Tapping into it. It's like,
Trying.
He's been paid for that and like.
Doesn't mean that's it.
There's a guy in that. Not going in. Sewer.
Or bathroom triplexes on a small road with.
I think we just say like, it's just that's the, meet the ordinance,
Good work.
health and safety code. I think just general.
Roads.
Yeah. Seeing more of these long, narrow lots where people are doing it in town, sideways, you know?
I did talk to the guy in the SDC, saying you guys.
Oh.
Code protective, that.
Yeah, we talked
Yeah.
about that, like, there might be options.
Steve and I talked.
Yeah, Steve,
Under 200 square feet of covered seating, then you don't have to have a roof. But if it's over that 200,
It's like
square
a couple
foot.
of years,
immediately.
like 10 years of financing.
Yeah.
Yes.
oh, just be yeah, exactly. You know, then fire gets involved, and fire is like, well, if there's an emergency, we have to exit people in a hurry.
Well, they were like, so my
Make
wife.
sure they're not like, this is
We
a
had a
little
little
expire.
patio in the back,
Apply for an extension.
and I could only put so much like sun tub
Yeah.
cover over there, because it's not like a fire code related thing,
Yeah, a
and,
couple.
you know, so of course I put that much. Not my inspection, put the rest of it up there.
You must, they must
But
really want
there's
it.
no product that's,
Yeah.
that has that fire rating, you know,
That one?
yeah.
That's
She wanted me to work harder.
Good luck.
Yeah.
She's like,
Yeah.
turn it into my school project, she'd get more out of me.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So that's what I.
Down at the end of the hall that way. You
Um,
go all the way to the end of the hall that way. Yeah.
and so it took longer as well, instead of finishing that December like I had planned. I didn't finish the fall of the summer because I had to do the whole. Yeah, I was just.
I feel like most people when you're doing pieces, yeah, they like either $20 a piece.
But I just kept working and. Yeah, so that the time. So they not only turned it into full time after that temporary job, then they offered me a house.
And you were just doing like legal comprehensive planning.
Mostly, but with. That's how I met Pat, actually. Talking about, because I was, so that was on the Junction City Planning Commission when I was working.
No, it wasn't.
Huh?
No, it wasn't.
Coburg, sorry, Coburg. I don't know, I did later work for Junction.
All of Coburg just got in, or the alarms about that.
Sorry, Coburg. Yeah, so I was doing.
I wasn't listening. So I only did all the rest of the stuff we worked on, kind of slide,
City
was that
with Elcog, that was.
accepted?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, we haven't,
So I
we
did
haven't
both.
gone through planning
Right,
commission
I started.
yet, so we're trying to finalize this draft and the one before that, before we take it back to the planning commission for their like recommendation to city council, but, yeah. I don't think there were any major changes from. I just think city council just had some general concerns about noise and compatibility, and so that was the majority of the discussions that we.
Sure, when you're putting residential back in some of those mixed use.
Abutting the
areas.
industrial,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a big concern that we kept hearing over and over again.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's been helpful to have you guys be like, no taller buildings, or we don't care about those requirements. And it's helpful for us too to, you know, take the recommendations that we take here and then include that in our planning commission packet. And I do feel like the planning commission really listens to those. and city council, of course. They're like, well, what were their recommendations? Why do we do all this? All right, before we get back in, I'm gonna shamelessly plug Jade, who's here. And you guys probably haven't met my intern, Jade Zito. She is going to graduate this June. Shameless plug for any jobs. Yeah, she is she's, yeah.
About 3
So-
p.m.
3 p.m.
3 p.m., yep.
planner. Yeah, so she's been helping me with this. She's gonna be here until the end of June and then wherever the wind blows her after that. So, you get a chance afterward, come say hi after this meeting or, talk to her about your projects. I know she's interested and she's really helped me with, preparing packets and things like that. So, she's great. All right, we're gonna move on because we've got about a little less than half an hour. So Sarah, we're gonna start with chapter 5. So.
Yeah, right.
So non-conforming uses, Sandy and Mark were really instrumental in getting this one changed. This was a big one. That was kind of an annoyance. So we massively overhauled this section. Basically it's broken down by what's the non-conforming situation. Is it a use, a structure, or a lot? Then we just basically clarified what are the criteria, right? So if it's an expansion, a discontinuance, an abandonment, or the approval criteria, it's all listed under, again, that non-conforming use, structure, or lot. And then fun fact, I know Jenna mentioned this at our last TAC meeting, the discontinuance. So we went from 6 months to 1 year. And again, I'm gonna shamelessly plug that most jurisdictions have 1 year. I'm gonna have Sandy cover this.
Oh, I wasn't gonna cover it. I was thinking I would make a suggestion. In terms of the title, maybe we should call it non-conforming situations. Instead of uses, which I hadn't caught before.
Yeah.
Because it's really not just about uses.
Yeah.
So what were you wanting me to talk about?
Shamelessly plug that, oh yeah, that she really liked that we went forward with making these changes as I proposed.
Yeah.
Because I know it was a headache for Mark too, of like, if you're reading this section and you're like, you're talking about structures 1 minute, then you're talking about uses and you're putting them in the exact same section. So, yeah. So it's been rewritten.
And I think it's also important that it got pushed out to a year because 6 months is really short.
Exactly. So more time. Yay. For you to bring another use back in. Next slide, please, Sarah. I'm thinking we're gonna get through this section pretty fast. So, we'll get through it. This one, I wish Bill was here because he'd love this one. This is for minimum development standards and site plan review. So 2 significant changes, both to the applicability section. For MDS applicability, it lists the new clear and objective design standards for multiple unit housing built in the community, commercial, and mixed use district. However, the MDS process is not applicable to new multiple unit housing. Again, that's a different process. The amendments will allow mixed use district development to be processed as an MDS application. So you could technically under these standards qualify as an MDS application, just not new multiple unit housing. New multiple unit housing, site plan review, or their own type 1 process. They're qualified under the type 1. So for site plan review, same thing. The new clear and objective design standards for multiple unit housing, mixed use development, those standards were added here too. There's kind of a general cleanup. We also added just a tiny bit of flexibility in there. So there are certain situations where you could qualify in a mixed use district for MDS, where right now you can't.
So a commercial building, some small commercial building in the mixed use district, you could do.
Yep. Sarah, next slide. We went through that super fast. The last thing, definitions, chapter 6. There were a few things in this that we added. So the first one, we struck courtyard housing from the development code and definitions to not conflict with cottage cluster middle housing option. This was a request to Mark again, that it can be quite confusing when a developer comes to the counter and is like, what are these courtyard housing standards and how are they different from cottage cluster? So strike definitions and from a code.
I think the state would help with any of those naming anymore. They were like, that's a triplex, that's a triplex, but that's a triplex.
We lobbied the state to try and clean that up and it was not successful.
We got some initial traction with the governor's office and we had a representative who was ready to sponsor it, but we weren't getting support from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, so it stalled.
I'm surprised.
Okay, we added mobile food units. Okay, so we talked about the food trucks and food carts to the city's definition. Again, a group of 3 or more food units, mobile food units is considered a pod, and that was also added. So you have your mobile food unit and your mobile food unit pod. Different, but defined. To the manufactured dwelling definitions, we added an RV and a prefabricated dwelling to comply with state law. The definitions, that's an allowed use in a manufactured dwelling park. Note that there are 2 different options for prefabricated dwellings in the development code. So there is the model or the ORS state law requirement to what is a prefabricated dwelling. And then there's also the model code language, which is slightly a little bit more flexible. And it just replaces what's in there right now. So we have the choice basically about what definition we want to use there. So if you're looking through chapter 6, you'll see there's 2 different options there. We struck the minimum height requirement for mixed use buildings from the definition, because not all mixed use buildings are 2 stories. There's an exception for this in the CFA overlay though. It requires all development in the mixed use commercial district in the downtown refinement plan boundary have a minimum height of at least 2 stories above grade. So exception in downtown. Everywhere else doesn't apply. We added post-secondary education to the definitions as an allowed use in the CFA overlay and mixed use districts. We added recreational vehicle parks as a definition. And we added a definition for stacking lane to better define the new drive-through standards in 4.7130. It was helpful to add what a stacking lane is in relation to a drive-through to the definitions, the space occupied by vehicles queuing on the development site and behind any public sidewalk for a service to be provided at a drive-through facility. And those are the definitions. Sarah, next slide. So for non-conforming uses, hopefully we're ready to talk about this. Staff reorganized and clarified the section so that each section is based on uses, structures, or lots. They also extended from 6 months to 1 year. Does the TAC find that these proposed changes make it easier to determine what is a non-conforming use, structure, or lot? And does the TAC support extending the period from 6 months to 1 year? Hopefully this is a slam dunk. But if there's any questions.
3 years, no. 1 year is not that long. That's like, it's better than 6 months.
What does that designate, the 1 year? Like,
So how long it can continue. So let's say the coffee cart, like drive-throughs. Glenwood is a great example. We don't allow drive-throughs in Glenwood. So there are maybe some existing situations where you have a drive-through in Glenwood and let's say that business closes down, they vacate the building and then some other developer comes in and is like, hey, I want to occupy that building again as a drive-through use. You have 1 year, you went from 6 months to 1 year to add in a new drive-through use before it discontinues as a non-conforming use, and then you have to meet the existing standards. So you couldn't then, after 1 year, come in and be like, I want to add a drive-through. Yeah, pick a new use.
Or specifically,
It is only for non-conforming uses, so I'll use like the Sherry's on Q Street that is empty now. It's a conforming use, it's a restaurant in a commercial zone that's allowed. So it could be 5 years later, it's vacant, a new restaurant could move right back into it, no problem. It's only if that were a non-conforming.
sure.
like,
Only like prohibited. So there's certain districts and certain locations where we say this use is not allowed, right? So like again, with the drive-throughs, we talk about, Mark mentioned in the mixed use commercial that there's probably something that says you can't have a drive-through lane between the building and the street in downtown. Well, you know,
Find that, by the way, it says where practicable, so that's the gray area.
yeah.
but like
Don't you
every,
love those not clear and objective language? Thanks, Mark.
but like every automotive use in Glenwood.
Yeah.
Basically, every vacant.
Yeah.
Used to be an automotive use. That's the most logical thing for it to be again, but it sat for 6 months and now it can't be ever that ever again in its entirety forever. And so it just sits vacant and abandoned instead.
We get a buyer who comes to us, I just got it, it's great. Now they said, hey, I can't do it. I thought I could do.
Exactly. Like Brooks Auto Parts.
Okay, everybody good? Next slide. MDS and site plan. I love this one. Mark, brought me back down to earth a little bit, just a tiny bit with this one. I tried to be as flexible as possible. So does the TAC support allowing development within the mixed use district to be processed as an MDS application? I want to preface the clause here. New multiple unit housing would still not be processed as an MDS application. So Mark mentioned earlier the hotel that is converting on Harlow from a hotel to multifamily. So when I ask the building department says, technically that's new multiple unit housing because you're adding like a kitchen.
No, they have kitchens. They're not adding kitchens. They're studios now. They have kitchens.
They have their own stoves. Okay. So if they didn't have their own stove, then it would be considered. Yeah.
I mean, it is still technically a change of use from a hotel to.
From a building code standpoint, it's likely a change of occupancy.
Yeah.
And from planning, it is a change of use from a hotel to multi-unit residential. But it's just, what does it take to make that conversion happen?
It's on Mohawk.
Harlan.
And so the example I'll use on that is the one thing, and this kind of goes back to the MS4 permit and some of our, groundwater protection stuff, is the one thing on that site that I would see requiring them to do to convert it would be to update their dumpster. Their dumpster enclosure area is currently not covered, which is a requirement, and is not drained to sanitary sewer. So we are going to send them through an MDS review process, and that'll likely be the one thing. But if we found that site not in conformance with our current landscaping standards for parking lot and all this stuff, are we going to make them now massively revise that site to bring it up to current standards? That's probably not in anybody's best interest.
So are we saying that it is allowed to use the MDS? Or no, because it's new mixed, or because it's,
It's gonna depend on if
New
it's a new
multiple.
multiple unit housing or not.
well, I mean, it is new multiple unit housing. And it should be able
It
to
depends
cross
what the building
easily.
department and planning says. I'm just gonna like preface it as that. They can duke it out.
I mean, I'm in support of it being easy and that
Yeah.
it could be processed by the MDS, but I'm concerned that the language isn't actually saying that.
Yeah.
Is it saying it?
Ask her.
What's the question? Is it, if it's a new multiple unit housing?
Is
Because
the
that's
new
what it does
lang-
say. I didn't change that.
So is the new language going to allow the thing that Mark is doing? Because that's awesome and we should do it, but is it actually going to, would it allow that?
Well, so Haley, I'm just stepping in to
Yeah.
help because I think what I saw on your previous slide is the conversion from commercial to residential is a type 1 decision.
Yes.
So is that the same as MDS?
Yes. Type 1
So
application.
we're talking about conversion facilities, not new construction.
So I think that's the difference here, is that if you're converting, it will be a type 1 MDS, whereas if you're creating new multiple unit housing, then it's gonna go through that site plan review.
Or would it, the Mill Street Apartments been able to do it as MDS, or did you have to add like restrooms and things in there?
I mean, we had to add a ton of stuff. inside.
Yeah,
We had
that
to
a lot
add
of stuff.
40 bathrooms and 40 kitchens.
Yeah.
But that was a conversion, but it wouldn't have been MDS, it would still be site review because it's a big conversion, right?
Any other questions?
I'm not sure that was, I mean, I don't know if we would have called that commercial.
The Mill Street Apartments?
Yeah. I'm not sure that was actually a commercial use prior.
Well, it was a school and then it was school admin.
It was institutional.
Yeah, institutional.
So I don't know that the commercial to residential conversion would have applied in that case.
That's true, okay. That's it, okay.
It's tricky.
Yeah. No,
Because, I mean, in that case, commercial, we're talking about land use, not building permit.
yeah,
Not necessarily district, right? You could have a ton of uses in a district that are not necessarily, like Sandy said, commercial.
Go forward.
Definitions, any questions or concerns regarding the amendments to the definitions? Are there any definitions that you may know of? I'm adding this helpful little clause for all y'all, that are unclear or conflicting with the section and could use a minor amendment. So I know, Mark, his team comes to me all the time. We found this one section that we hope you can add. Do you have any thoughts on this? Let's see if we can rework it. Like driveways.
try to find something.
Mark was like, that driveway definition doesn't match our, what we know on the ground. The difference between a driveway approach and a driveway. I'll read through it. Take a minute. Maybe another, that option there, there's two options in that definitions for prefabricated dwellings. Does anybody have, tell me your preference, I guess, after you've read through it. Do you prefer state law or do you prefer flexibility of model code?
So what would be different?
With the definitions? So there's two options.
It's three of the six.
You can see the section that was crossed out of prefabricated dwelling. And then there's two options. We choose from the model code ORS definition, a prefabricated structure as defined by state law that is relocatable more than 8.5 feet wide. So again, we're putting how big it can be and designed for use as a single unit dwelling. Or you don't want to do state law. You want to have an alternate definition. We have some flexibility. Again, that ORS definition designed for residential occupancy in accordance with the state of Oregon pre-manufactured structures program. Building department gave me that handy dandy little one, and Springfield's building regulations. So building department just said, as long as you meet the building department standards for it being a residential occupancy, then you're good.
Well, anytime you reference the state code in there, then we just hunt for it, so, but sometimes you have to do that, I guess.
It's also because we want our building department to be able to look at these, right? Make sure that they're livable. There's no issues with being able to move it.
It's not a something in the traditional sense. What about the width? Like, I understand that the definition by ORS is that it's more than 8.5 feet wide, but does that really matter? I'm sure they're defining that, like they're making a difference between like probably an RV versus a prefab structure or something like that, right? But if you have a tiny house and it's 8 feet wide, does it not conform with this section then?
Does that come from like the highway transport? At like a maximum width or something
Well,
like
it says it's more than that. It needs to be bigger than that,
that? Oh.
which is what I'm thinking. Like if it's less than, then it's considered like an RV, right? Or something.
Just, glad you brought that up, it's interesting.
But like, am I gluing random sticks onto the side of my building, extra trim to make it 8.5 feet wide to make it fit the section, right? Like,
Good idea to change.
there's always a path. There's always a code path.
I'm hearing Jenna wants flexibility. Anybody else? Any
Flexibility generally.
the
But then-
alternate definition?
But then it gets messy in terms of the state of Oregon pre-manufactured structures program. Like, what if you buy a tiny house from out of state? Now I need to go try to retrofit it to meet the Oregon pre-manufactured structures program. What if it's from Idaho? Now I need to go double check all of that code. Like, is that overly restrictive or just?
Although a lot of out of staters are trying to meet our code requirements too, so. Yeah.
Yeah, but whatever, I'm hashtag van lifing and I bought a tiny house and I don't have any money and I'm trying to just put this thing on my mother-in-law's property and now I need to go research the state of Oregon pre-manufactured structures program and trying to decipher if my
Yeah.
if my building meets it as an owner, right, who may not be familiar and educated in code.
You have to reference the ORS at all. I mean, you guys had a building or structural unit that had been whole or substantial part manufactured at an offsite location.
That's probably covered in the ORS 455.010. Kind of a catch-all. Don't you love it when we do that, where we just say, here's the state law, and then you have to go to the state law and be like, what the heck are they talking about here in particular? It's like we just talked about CFAC with the drive-through standards.
Yeah, and working in multiple cities and they some reference it and some don't, and then you're looking at the state and it just makes the job hard to know what, what the code is.
Any other questions, thoughts?
It almost seems like, I know you don't probably want to mash these up necessarily, but like a prefabricated structure maybe is defined in ORS 455.010 because it's listed in both of these. But that is relocatable if you want it to be more, and then it is either designed for use as a single unit dwelling or it is designed for residential occupancy. And in accordance with Springfield's building regulations. Without looking at the State of Oregon Pre-Manufactured Structures Program or specifically ORS 455.10, like it's hard to know whether this is.
I'm in there now, they reference the state building code and excluding standard fire marshal rules. It's not too big of a definition, but if it's not, couldn't you just put it in there? Instead of referencing it.
Well, I think that the challenge then is if it changes at the state level, then we don't keep up.
Darn state always changes stuff, I tell you.
I think it's kind of nice when code like this references other standards that someone may have to meet because they may not otherwise know. And try to do something and then get called back on it. It's kind of a nice little hint of, hey, you also got to look at this.
Hyperlink it then.
Yeah, it might be fine. I don't know how complicated those are to meet.
Oregon, Idaho, and Washington have a tri-state reciprocity agreement for this, so.
Yeah, was that Montana? Nevada.
All right, Sarah, next slide. So, next meeting, I'm hoping for at least one more in next month, in April. It'll be hopefully the last one, but I'm always available. The second or third week in April, either Wednesday or Thursday. If you have questions, reach out to me. It's pretty easy. My email, H as in hat, Campbell @springfield-or.gov. I may have Jade helping me with some of your responses, researching. If there's something technical that comes up, she's great for that. But of course, Sandy and Mark, who I know you guys have worked with before. They also advised me a lot on this. Sandy gave me a lot of pointers with this draft before it even showed up here tonight at this meeting. So thanks. And Mark too, who brings me back down to earth. I'm like, no, don't put that in the code. Nobody's going to want to meet that. Anyway, thanks guys. Feel free to come ask me questions.
Thanks, Bill. I did have a web, it's not about the content, but you have all these in the agenda. I don't see where I can download them.
It's like, so if you put the drop down, there's like in the right hand corner, there's an arrow that allows you to download.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So are we?
Yep. Let's
Okay.
And
Yeah. Thanks, Edward.
These are all gonna be reviewed and adopted at one big chunk by.
Planning Commission and City Council. So I'm aiming for